Announcer bot is active. The qualification session is at Kyalami Grand Prix circuit, 9 hour in Johannesburg, South Africa. The wind speed is 3 km/h from the north-northeast. Carlos Huertas is P2. Carlos Huertas is up 0.34 in the crocodiles. Gerson Robia from Colombia in Cheetah is 13th, up 0.56 with 20 kilos on mediums. Jose Miguel Moncada from Colombia is P12 with 9 kilos. Juan Pablo Carmona from Colombia in Clubhouse Bend is P7, up 0.39 with 20 kilos. Juan Pablo Carmona is up 2.57 in mineshaft. Juan Pablo Carmona is up 2.44 in Cheetah. Juan Pablo Carmona improved his P7 with a 144.678. 2.212 off pole. Juan Pablo Carmona is up 0.09 in Crowthorne. Juan Pablo Arango is provisional pole with a 143.784. Diego Ortiz is provisional pole with a 142.708. Juan Pablo Carmona is up 0.17 in Sunset. 5 minutes remaining in the session. Carlos Huertas from Colombia is first, up 0.73 with 70 kilos. Esteban Gomez from Colombia in Leocock is 11th, up 0.15 with 45 kilos. Esteban Gomez is up 0.22 in Cheetah. Esteban Gomez is provisional pole with a 141.828. Sebastian Aristizabal from Colombia in the Essies is P10, up 0.34 with 20 kilos on softs. Sebastian Aristizabal is up 0.43 in the crocodiles. Sebastian Aristizabal improved his second with a 142.176. 0.348 off pole. Carlos Huertas in Clubhouse Bend is P3, up 0.61. Ricardo Pineda from Colombia in the Crocodiles is P17, up 0.17 with 60 kilos. Esteban Gomez in the Crocodiles is first up 0.38. Ricardo Pineda in Ingwe is 17th. Ricardo Pineda improved his P7 with a 143.041. 1.213 off pole. Esteban Gomez is provisional pole with a 141.761. Carlos Huertas is third. Carlos Huertas is up 0.30 in Cheetah. Carlos Huertas improved his second with a 142.020. 0.259 off pole. Christian Gomez from Colombia in Ingwe is P13 with 20 kilos. Christian Gomez improved his 12th with a 143.970. 2.209 off pole. Sebastian Aristizabal in Ingwe is P4. Posada from Colombia is 15th up 0.34 with 20 kilos. Diego Ortiz from Colombia in Cheetah is 5th up 0.51 with 45 kilos. Diego Ortiz improved his P5 with a 142.290. 0.529 off pole. Diego Ortiz is up 0.01 in Crowthorne. Sebastian Aristizabal is 4th. Sebastian Aristizabal is up 0.26 in Clubhouse Bay. Jean-Pierre Perrin from Colombia in Leocop is 6th up 0.30 with 9 kilos. Sebastian Aristizabal in Mineshaft is 4th up 0.20 on solids. Juan Pablo Aristizabal from Colombia in Cheetah is P16 up 0.21 with 4 kilos on solids. The qualifying session is now in overtime. Juan Pablo Aristizabal improved his second with a 141.987. 0.226 off pole. Juan Pablo Aristizabal is up 0.05 in Crowthorne. Johannesburgo Posada is P16. Johannesburgo Posada is up 0.68 in the Crocodiles. Jose Miguel Moncada in Ingwe is 13th. Jose Miguel Moncada improved his 12th with a 143.600. 1.839 off pole. Juan Pablo Carmona in Leocop is 16th up 0.41. Juan Pablo Carmona is up 0.40 in Cheetah. Juan Pablo Carmona improved his P14 with a 143.948. 2.187 off pole. Juan Carlos Guerin from Colombia in Crowthorne is P19 with 10 kilos. race session is at Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit, 9 hour in Johannesburg, South Africa. The wind speed is 3 km/h from the north. Daniel Quintero is P1. Esteban Gomez from Colombia is second with 45 kilos. Juan Pablo Aristizabal from Colombia is third with 4 kilos on softs. Carlos Huertas from Colombia is fourth with 70 kilos. Juan Garcia from Colombia is fifth with 35 kilos. Sebastián Aristizabal from Colombia is P6 with 20 kilos on softs. J.Enriquez from Colombia is 7th with 35 kilos. Diego Ortiz from Colombia is P8 with 45 kilos. Jean-Pierre Ferrand from Colombia is 9th with 9 kilos. Ricardo Pineda from Colombia is P10 with 60 kilos. Juan Pablo Arango is P11 with 35 kilos. Jose Miguel Moncada from Colombia is P12 with 9 kilos. Gerson Robia from Colombia is P13 with 20 kilos on mediums. Juan Pablo Carmona from Colombia is 14th with 20 kilos. Christian Gomez from Colombia is 15th with 20 kilos. Santiago Hernandez from Colombia is P16 with 35 kilos. Juan Carlos Courin from Colombia is 17th with 10 kilos. Giovanna Gomez from Colombia is P18 with 5 kilos on mediums. Jonathan Posada from Colombia is 19th with 20 kilos. Race start. Daniel Quintero is P1. Carlos Huertas in Crowthorne is third. Sebastián Aristizabal in Barbecue is fourth. Juan Pablo Aristizabal in Sunset is sixth. Gerson Robia in the Essies is P6. Jean-Pierre Ferrand is 11th. Jean-Pierre Ferrand passed Juan Carlos Courin for P10. Juan Carlos Courin in Mineshaft is P11. Juan Carlos Courin lost P12 to Jose Miguel Moncada. Juan Pablo Carmona in Cheetah is P14. Garcia is 15, 0.3 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. Diego Ortiz in Jigski sweep on lap 2 is P12 battling Juan Carlos Courin. Diego Ortiz lost P17 to Christian Gomez. Esteban Gomez in Clubhouse Bend is P4, 0.5 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Juan Garcia in Clubhouse Bend is 12th driving a Aston Martin, 0.3 behind Juan Carlos Courin. Juan Pablo Arango is 14, 0.3 behind Giovanni Gomez. Juan Garcia in Mineshaft is P12, 0.5 behind Juan Carlos Courin. Juan Garcia passed Juan Carlos Courin for P11. Juan Carlos Courin in Cheetah is P12. Juan Pablo Carmona is 14, 0.2 behind Juan Pablo Arango. Juan Pablo Carmona passed Juan Pablo Arango for P13. Juan Pablo Arango in Barbecue is 14, 0.2 behind Juan Pablo Carmona. Jean-Pierre Perrin in Clubhouse Bend is 9, 0.3 behind Santiago Hernandez. J.Enriquez in the SEs is 15, 0.4 behind Juan Pablo Arango. Juan Pablo Arango is 1.4 faster last lap. Christian Gomez in Leo Kopp is 17, 0.2 behind Giovanni Gomez. Santiago Hernandez is 9, 0.3 ahead of Jose Miguel Moncada. Jose Miguel Moncada was 1.4 faster last lap. J.Enriquez in Cheetah is P14, 0.4 ahead of Juan Pablo Carmona. Giovanni Gomez is 16, 0.3 behind Christian Gomez. Jose Miguel Moncada in Barbecue is P10 with 9 kilos, 0.4 behind Santiago Hernandez. Jose Miguel Moncada was 2.3 faster last lap. Carlos Huertas in the SEs is P2. Best lap is a 142.624. 0.184 off the fastest lap. Esteban Gomez in Mineshaft is 4th, 0.5 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Jean-Pierre Perrin in Mineshaft is P8, 0.2 behind Ricardo Pineda. J.Enriquez is P13, 0.3 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. J.Enriquez was 1.3 faster last lap. J.Enriquez lost P13 to Juan Pablo Arango. Carlos Huertas in Jigski Sweep is P2 with 70 kilos, 0.3 behind Daniel Quintero. Carlos Huertas was 0.6 faster last lap. Esteban Gomez is 4th driving a BMW, 0.4 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Juan Garcia is 11th, 0.3 behind Jose Miguel Moncada. Jonathan Posada entering the pits is P19. Juan Garcia passed Jose Miguel Moncada for P10. Jose Miguel Moncada in Clubhouse Bend is 11th, 0.5 behind Juan Garcia. Juan Pablo Arango in the SEs on lap 5 is P13, 0.3 ahead of J.Enriquez. On lap 5 is P2, 0.3 ahead of Sebastian Aristizabal. Sebastian Aristizabal from Colombia is P3, 0.3 ahead of Esteban Gomez. Esteban Gomez in J.Enriquez I sweep is P4, 0.3 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Jonathan Posada exiting. Ricardo Pineda in J.Enriquez I sweep is 8th, 0.2 behind Jean-Pierre Perrin. Is 11th, 0.5 behind Santiago Hernandez. J.Enriquez in Sunset on lap 6 is 13th, 0.3 behind Juan Carlos Gouveia. Pablo Arango in the SEs is P14, 0.4 behind J.Enriquez. Carlos Huertas in Ingwe is 2nd, 0.4 behind Daniel Quintero. Esteban Gomez in the kink is P4, 0.3 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Ricardo Pineda in the kink is P8, 0.4 behind Jean-Pierre Perrin. On lap 7 is P13, 0.2 behind Juan Carlos Gouveia. J.Enriquez passed Juan Carlos Gouveia for P12. Juan Carlos Gouveia in Barbecue is P13, 0.5 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. Sebastian Aristizabal in Leo Cop on lap 7 is 3rd, 0.3 behind Carlos Huertas. Esteban Gomez in the Crocodiles is P4 driving a BMW, 0.4 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Is P11, 0.2 behind Santiago Hernandez. Juan Pablo Arango in the Crocodiles is 14th. Best lap is a 1:45.590. 3.150 off the fastest lap. Jean-Pierre Perrin entering the pit pits is 8th. Diego Ortiz in mineshaft is 17th, 0.3 behind Juan Pablo Carmona. Sebastian Aristizabal in sunset is P3, 0.3 ahead of Esteban Gomez. Cristian Gomez entering the pits is 18th. Esteban Gomez in the SEs is 4th. Best lap is a 1:42.728. 0.288 off the fastest lap. Jean-Pierre Perrin exiting pits on mediums. Juan Garcia in the SEs is 8th with 35 kilos, 0.3 behind Ricardo Pineda. J.Enriquez from Colombia in the SEs is 11th, 0.4 behind Santiago Hernandez. Cristian Gomez exiting pits. Juan Pablo Arango in Leo Kopp is P13. Esteban Gomez from Colombia is 4th, 0.3 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Jose Miguel Moncada entering the pits is 9th. Juan Garcia from Colombia is P8, 0.4 behind Ricardo Pineda. Juan Pablo Arango in the feet is 12, 0.3 behind Juan Carlos Gorin. Diego Ortiz is P15. Best lap is a 1:44.425. 1.985 off the fastest lap. Jose Miguel Moncada exiting pits. Sebastian Aristizabal in mineshaft is P3, 0.4 ahead of Esteban Gomez. Juan Garcia in Leo Kopp is 8th, 0.4 behind Ricardo Pineda. Juan Pablo Aristizabal entering the pits is P5. Juan Pablo Aristizabal is P5. Cristian Gomez in Jigski I sweep is 18. Esteban Gomez in barbecue is 4th with 45 kilos, 0.5 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Juan Pablo Aristizabal exiting pits. Juan Pablo Aristizabal in the kink is P10 driving a Chevrolet, 0.2 behind Santiago Hernandez. Juan Pablo Carmona entering the pits is 15th. Juan Pablo Arango in Jigski I sweep on lap 10 is 12, 0.3 behind Juan Carlos Gorin. Esteban Gomez in Leo Kopp is 4th, 0.3 behind Sebastian Aristizabal. Spent is P12, 0.3 behind Juan Carlos Gorin. Juan Pablo Carmona exiting pits. Sebastian Aristizabal entering the pits is 4th. Sebastian Aristizabal is P4. Santiago Hernandez in mineshaft P9, 0.5 ahead of Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Juan Garcia entering the pits is 6th. Ricardo Pineda entering the pits is P7. Juan Pablo Aristizabal in Cheetah is P10. Javier Enriquez entering the pits is 8th. Santiago Hernandez entering the pits is P10. Juan Pablo Carmona exiting pits. Juan Pablo Aristizabal passed Santiago Hernandez for P9. Sebastian Aristizabal exiting pits. Juan Pablo Aristizabal is now 6th. Santiago Hernandez is 12th. Juan Pablo Arango is P7. Ricardo Pineda exiting pits on mediums. Juan Carlos Guerin in barbecue is P8 driving a Porsche, 0.5 behind Juan Pablo Arango. Javier Enriquez exiting pits on mediums. Diego Ortiz in Jigski I sweep is P11 driving a BMW, 0.2 behind Ricardo Pineda. Santiago Hernandez exiting pits. Carlos Huertas in Cheetah is P2, 0.5 behind Daniel Quintero. Esteban Gomez entering the pits is P3. Diego Ortiz is 11th, 0.4 behind Ricardo Pineda. Esteban Gomez from Colombia is P4. Carlos Huertas is P2. Diego Ortiz is 11th, 0.5 behind Ricardo Pineda. Juan Pablo Carmona entering the pits is P19. Esteban Gomez exiting pits on mediums. Esteban Gomez in the kink on lap 12 is 9th on mediums, 0.4 behind Giovanni Gomez. Javier Enriquez in the kink is P14, 0.4 behind Jose Miguel Moncada. Juan Pablo Carmona exiting pits. Santiago Hernandez entering the pits is 15th. Javier Enriquez passed Jose Miguel Moncada for P13. Jose Miguel Moncada in barbecue is 14th, 0.5 behind Javier Enriquez. Jose Miguel Moncada was 3.4 faster last lap. Carlos Huertas in the kink is 2nd, 0.2 behind Daniel Quintero. Juan Pablo Arango entering the pits is 7th. Juan Pablo Arango is 7th, 0.5 behind Juan Carlos Guerin. Juan Pablo Arango was 1.0 faster last lap. Jose Miguel Moncada is P14 driving a Mercedes-Benz, 2.4 behind Javier Enriquez. Diego Ortiz entering the pits is 12th. Diego Ortiz is 13th on softs, 0.6 ahead of Jose Miguel Moncada. Jose Miguel Moncada in the kink is 12th, 2.8 behind Javier Enriquez. Juan Pablo Arango exiting pits on mediums. Jonathan Posada entering the pits is P17. Diego Ortiz is 14th. Daniel Quintero entering the pits is P1. Carlos Huertas entering the pits is P2. Diego Ortiz exiting pits. Carlos Huertas is P2. Gerson Robia from Colombia in Ingwe is third. Gerson Robia passed Daniel Quintero for first. Daniel Quintero from Colombia is second with 60 kilos. Daniel Quintero exiting pits. Carlos Huertas is P7 battling Giovanni Gomez. Carlos Huertas exiting pits. Carlos Huertas lost 7th to Giovanni Gomez. Carlos Huertas lost 8th to Jean-Pierre Parent. Jonathan Posada exiting pits on mediums. Ricardo Pineda from Colombia in barbecue is P10, 0.6 behind Carlos Huertas. Juan Pablo Aristizabal in Leocop is fourth. Best lap is a 1:42.923. 0.483 off the fastest lap. Juan Pablo Aristizabal passed Sebastian Aristizabal for P3. Carlos Huertas from Colombia in Mineshaft is 9, 0.8 behind Jean-Pierre Parent. Jean-Pierre Parent was 60.6 faster last lap. Giovanni Gomez in Cheetah is P7 driving a Chevrolet, 1.7 ahead of Jean-Pierre Parent. Giovanni Gomez entering the pits is P9. Juan Pablo Aristizabal is P3. Jean-Pierre Parent is P8, 0.3 behind Carlos Huertas. Esteban Gomez in Clubhouse Bend is P6, 0.5 behind Juan Carlos Guerin. Juan Carlos Guerin in Leocop is P6 with 10 kilos battling Esteban Gomez. Gerson Robia entering the pits is first. Gerson Robia is first driving a Bentley. Christian Gomez is P14. Giovanni Gomez exiting pits on softs. Sebastian Aristizabal is third driving a Bentley, 0.2 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Gerson Robia exiting pits on softs. Ricardo Pineda in Crowthorne is 9, 0.5 behind Jean-Pierre Parent. Aristizabal and Leo Kopp is third. Best lap is a 142.893. .453 off the fastest lap. Juan Pablo Carmona entering the pits is P16. J.Enriquez in Mannschaft is 10, 0.6 behind Ricardo Pineda. Ricardo Pineda in Ingwe on lap 16 is P9, 0.5 behind Jean-Pierre Ferrand. J.Enriquez on lap 17 is P10, 0.1 behind Ricardo Pineda. J.Enriquez passed Ricardo Pineda for 9th. On softs, 0.9 behind Juan Carlos Guerin. Gerson Rovia passed Juan Carlos Guerin for P5. Carlos Guerin is 6th driving a Porsche, 1.1 behind Gerson Rovia. Juan Carlos Guerin was 0.7 faster last lap. Juan Carlos Guerin entering the pits is P6. Ricardo Pineda entering the pits is P6. Giovanni Gomez is 15th with 5 kilos on softs. Jean-Pierre Ferrand in Crowthorne is 8th, 0.1 behind J.Enriquez. Juan Carlos Guerin exiting pits. Sebastian Aristizabal and Leo Kopp is P3, 1.3 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Jean-Pierre Ferrand in the S's is P8, 0.2 behind J.Enriquez. Sebastian Aristizabal is 3rd, 1.3 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Jose Miguel Moncada from Colombia is P9, 4.3 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. Juan Pablo Arango was 1.1 faster last lap. Aristizabal and Leo Kopp is P3 on mediums, 1.3 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Jose Miguel Moncada is P9, 3.9 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. Sebastián Aristizabal in barbecue is third, 1.1 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Jose Miguel Moncada in Crowthorne is 9th driving a Mercedes-Benz, 3.1 ahead of Juan Pablo Arango. Sebastián Aristizabal in the Crocodiles on lap 20 is P3, 1.0 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Daniel Quintero in Jig Ski Sweep is P1. Sebastián Aristizabal in Sunset is P3 on mediums, 0.9 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Daniel Quintero from Colombia in Mineshaft is P1. Sebastián Aristizabal in England is P3, 1.3 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. J.Enriquez in Ingwe is 7th, 1.9 ahead of Jean-Pierre Ferrat. Esteban Gomez in Clubhouse Bend is 5th. Sebastian Aristizabal in the Crocodiles is 3rd, 1.2 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Esteban Gomez is 5th, 1.3 behind Gerson Robia. Sebastian Aristizabal in Sunset is P3. Jean-Pierre Ferrand in Sunset is 8th, 3.0 behind J.Enriquez. Sebastian Aristizabal in Ingwe is P3 on mediums, 1.1 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. J.Enriquez in Ingwe on lap 23 is P7, 2.4 ahead of Jean-Pierre Ferrand. Sebastian Aristizabal in the Essies on lap 24 is 3rd, 1.4 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Juan Pablo Aristizabal in the Crocodiles is 2nd. Sebastian Aristizabal is 3rd, 0.9 behind Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Daniel Quintero in Clubhouse Bend is P1 on mediums, 3.8 ahead of Juan Pablo Aristizabal. Juan Pablo Aristizabal was 7.2 faster last lap. Giovanni Gomez in Clubhouse Bend is 14. Best lap is a 1:45.572. 3.132 off the fastest lap. The leader has just finished the race. Daniel Quintero finished P1. Juan Pablo Aristizabal finished P2. Sebastián Aristizabal finished P3. Gerson Robia finished 4th. Esteban Gomez finished 5th. Carlos Huertas finished 6th. Christian Gomez finished 13th. J.Enriquez finished P7. Giovanni Gomez finished P14. Jean-Pierre Perrin finished P8. Jose Miguel Moncada finished P9. Juan Pablo Arango finished 10th. Juan Carlos Guerin finished P11. Jonathan Posada finished P15. Diego Ortiz finished 12th.